Two young sisters ask a billionaire to be their father for a day, and his answer would change all of their lives. They were just two sisters trying to navigate a school challenge that hurt more than any exam. Alone, they saw him, a powerful and unreachable man, as their only hope. But what started as a desperate request, born from the courage only a sister's love can inspire, was about to unravel a secret kept buried for 7 years. This is a story about destiny, chance encounters, and the true meaning of family. His answer would alter the course of 3 lives, forever. And it all began right there, on the worn-out concrete of the Northwood Elementary School playground. While the other children ran into their parents' arms, Maya and Lily remained on the last bench, 2 small figures with a giant problem. Career day was in 2 days, and they didn't have a father to bring. Their mother, Clara, would be at her second shift job, as always. That's when Maya's gaze drifted across the street and locked onto what seemed like the only solution. Leaning against a sleek black car in front of the glass skyscraper where their mother cleaned the highest floors, there he was, Alexander Sterling, a man who looked like he had stepped off the cover of a business magazine. The impeccable suit, the gleaming watch, the impatience in his eyes as he spoke into his phone. "That's him," Maya whispered, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Him who? Mom said we shouldn't," Lily began, tugging on her sister's arm. "Mom doesn't have to know. Come on," Maya cut her off, already in motion. Pulling her reluctant sister by the hand, the two of them crossed the street, small and invisible in the flow of traffic. Alexander ended his call with a sharp gesture, his irritation obvious over some deal that hadn't gone as planned. He only noticed the 2 little girls when they stopped a few feet away from him. He raised an eyebrow, a mix of surprise and impatience. Maya took a deep breath, feeling Lily's fear behind her like a shadow, and let out the question that would make time stand still. "Sir, excuse me, would you be our pretend dad for career day?" The world seemed to stop. The noise of the cars, the distant voices, everything vanished. The look of power on Alexander's face dissolved, replaced by a shock so pure and profound that for a moment the man who commanded empires forgot how to breathe. But to understand the courage behind that impossible request, you have to go back a few hours and enter the small world Maya and Lily called home. A 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up building, where the scent of brewed coffee mixed with the cleaning chemicals that clung to their mother's uniform. But here, every corner told a story of love and effort. Colorful drawings covered the refrigerator door. Small, carefully watered plants crowded the only living room window, stretching for the sun. This was Clara's universe with her daughters. Clara was a force of nature disguised by exhaustion. She would come home well after dark, her hands rough and her back aching from a full day of cleaning luxury offices downtown. Even bone-tired, her first act was always the same: to kiss the tops of her daughters' heads and check their schoolwork. On the small kitchen table, next to her plate of reheated food, her anatomy and pharmacology textbooks waited. The dream of becoming a nurse was her bet on a future where her daughters wouldn't have to know the weight of her days. Maya and Lily understood this silent sacrifice. They were a team. After school, they did their homework together quietly, so as not to disturb their mother's rest before she left again for her night classes. Maya, with her vivid imagination, would invent stories for her sister. Lily, with her quiet calm, organized their school supplies and made sure everything was ready for the next day. They protected each other, completed each other, living in a bubble of shared understanding. The news about career day had landed like a stone in their path. They saw their mother's face tighten with worry as she read the note from the school. They knew their mum couldn't miss work. Her boss had already warned her last month when Lily had a high fever. Another absence, and the job that paid the rent and bought the textbooks would be in jeopardy. It wasn't that Clara didn't want to go, she simply couldn't. And it was in that dead end, out of love for their mother and a desire to protect her from one more worry, that the most absurd plan of their lives was born. They would handle it themselves, That desire wasn't born from nothing. It had been simmering on low heat, in the school hallways, in the excited whispers during recess. Career Day was the most anticipated event of the semester. A day when the classroom walls disappeared and the real world came inside, brought in by the parents. For most kids, it was a day of pride. For Maya and Lily, it was a painful reminder of what they were missing. They saw the others. They saw little Leo, who could barely contain his excitement, telling everyone his dad, a firefighter, was bringing his official helmet for the presentation. They saw Chloe, the most popular girl in their class, rehearsing with her mum, an architect, how she would explain the model of a building they had built together. Every overheard conversation, every laugh shared between a parent and child, was a small puncture in their hearts. It wasn't envy of what they had, but a deep ache for the void they felt. The pride that lit up their classmates' faces was a reflection they couldn't find in their own mirrors. One afternoon, sitting in the library pretending to read, the anguish spilled out in a whisper. "No one is going to understand our poster about Mom being a hero," Maya said, her voice thick with frustration. "But she is," Lily defended, with her unwavering loyalty. "She saves us every day." "I know," Maya agreed, kicking the leg of her chair. "But how are we supposed to explain to everyone that our mom's profession is too tired to come? That she works so hard, she doesn't have time to be a career day mom?" The childish logic was cruel, but it was the truth they felt. Clara's absence wasn't from a lack of love, and they knew it, but the explanation was too complex for a 7-year-old world that only understood what it could see, and what they saw was loneliness, approaching relentlessly. So, they began to daydream. They imagined what it would be like. Walking into the loud gymnasium, not alone, but holding the hand of a tall, smiling man. Someone who would kneel down to fix the collar on their shirts and whisper, "You're gonna knock 'em dead." They imagined being on stage, and in the middle of their presentation, they'd look out at the audience and see a familiar face, cheering just for them. A father. It didn't matter if he was real or pretend. What they wanted with all the force of their small hearts was the feeling of not being alone, the feeling of being, for just one day, a complete family in the eyes of the world. This desire grew so large, so urgent, that it overpowered fear, logic, and all of their mother's warnings. They didn't just want to present a project about Clara's profession. They wanted to present the dignity they felt was denied to them by the absence of a father figure. They needed a shield, a representative, an actor for the most important role of their lives. And it was with this fantasy burning in their chests that they looked across the street and saw Alexander Sterling. He wasn't just a rich man in an expensive car. In that moment, he was the embodiment of the father they had just invented in their dreams. He was perfect. Alexander Sterling was a man accustomed to billion-dollar proposals, to aggressive mergers and negotiations that could shift entire industries. But this proposal, coming from a 7-year-old girl with pigtails and startlingly serious eyes, left him completely disarmed. For a second, he thought it was a prank, a new and bizarre kind of scam. But as he looked at the terrified face of the other girl, Lily, hiding behind her sister like a frightened little animal, he knew this was painfully real. He knelt, a gesture that surprised him as much as it did the girls. The expensive fabric of his designer pants touched the dirty asphalt of the sidewalk as he tried to bring some order to the absurdity of the situation. "Look," he began, his voice softer than he intended, "that is, very brave of you. But I can't do that. I'm a stranger. It wouldn't be right, you understand?" He expected them to get scared, or maybe cry and run away. But Maya didn't back down. Her small shoulders squared, as if carrying the weight of the world. "We know it's not right," she said with an impeccable logic that dismantled him. "But what's also wrong is us having to get on stage alone because our mom will get fired if she misses work to see us, and we don't have anyone else." The brutal honesty of the sentence hit him in a place he had kept locked for years. He, who lived in a world of half-truths and corporate strategy, was not prepared for this transparency. Lily, seeing her sister had captured the man's attention, added in a voice that was almost a breath, "We just need someone to clap, so it doesn't look like we don't have any family at all." In that instant, something inside Alexander shifted. For a fraction of a second, he wasn't the billionaire CEO. He was just a boy at an expensive boarding school, staring out the window on visiting days, dreaming that one day someone would show up for him. He shook his head hard, pushing the unwanted memory away. This was insane. Getting involved in these children's lives was a risk he couldn't afford. His life was controlled, scheduled, secure. There was no room for chaos, for the raw emotion that radiated from them like heat. He stood up, adjusting his suit as if putting on armor. The businessman was back in control. "I'm sorry," he said, and the sincerity in his voice surprised him. "I really am, but the answer is no. I can't help you." He turned before he could change his mind, walking with firm steps toward his driver, who was watching the scene with discreet curiosity. He didn't look back. He got in the car, and the door closed with a heavy thud, sealing him off from their world. As the car pulled away, he allowed himself one quick glance in the rearview mirror. He saw the two small figures standing on the sidewalk, shrinking until they became just a speck of disappointment in the middle of the city. He took a deep breath, convinced he had made the only sensible decision. He had closed the book on that bizarre story. He just didn't know that for Maya and Lily, the hardest part wasn't hearing that no, the worst, was yet to come. Career day arrived with a brilliant sun that seemed to mock the grey cloud hanging over Maya and Lily. The school gymnasium was a cauldron of energy and family pride. Everywhere they looked, there was a scene that squeezed their hearts. There were parents in uniform, firefighters, police officers, doctors, and mothers in elegant work attire, confidently explaining their careers. Complex models, real equipment, professional banners. Every booth was a small monument to success and togetherness. And in the middle of it all, there was their booth. A small oasis of simplicity in a desert of flashiness. A single sheet of poster board propped on a chair, where they had painstakingly drawn a caped figure fighting dust monsters, and next to it, the same figure in a nurse's cap, caring for a smiling patient. The title, in colourful and slightly crooked letters, read, "Clara, a hero in 2 shifts." It was a pure tribute, an act of love, but there in that gymnasium, amidst so much noise and shine, it just looked small. It looked sad. Hand in hand, each one anchoring the other, they watched the world spin without them. They saw Leo's dad, the firefighter, let his son wear his helmet, and a wave of laughter and cell phone flashes lit up their corner. They saw Chloe's mum, the architect, patiently explaining the details of her model, the pride in her voice making her daughter seem to stand taller. Every interaction was living proof of what had been denied to them. The camaraderie, the visible support, the simple act of having someone there by their side. With every passing minute they felt smaller, more transparent. "And now please welcome the sisters Maya and Lily," the teacher announced into the microphone. The walk to the center of the gym felt miles long. The general din seemed to fade, replaced by 100 curious stares that focused on them. They stood in front of the microphone, which suddenly looked huge and menacing. Maya held the poster board with both hands, so no one would see them shaking. "Hi," she began, her voice much softer than the gym's buzz. "Our mom, Clara, couldn't be here today. She has a very, very important job." Lily leaned into the mic, as if sharing a secret with hundreds of people. "She cleans really big buildings during the day to make everything shiny and safe." Her voice was a thread. "And at night, she studies to be a nurse and save lives. That's why she's our hero." They tried to explain the drawings, but the words got lost in the air. The audience's attention began to wander. Children whispered. Parents checked their phones. What they received wasn't mockery, but something almost worse: polite indifference. The pitying looks from some adults. They were the day's melancholy attraction, the poor little girls. When they finished, the silence was broken by a sparse and lukewarm applause, led by the teachers. It was a perfunctory sound, a sound that said, "Thank you for participating, now we can move on to the next one." No one shouted, "Great job!" No one stood up to take a picture. With their shoulders slumped and their eyes fixed on the floor, they returned to their empty booth. They sat behind the poster board, which now felt like a fragile barricade against the world. The sound of the fair returned in full force, but to them it was just a distant, muffled noise. They didn't cry. The lump in their throats was too big to let the tears pass. They just sat there, hand in hand, two small islands of silence and loneliness in an ocean of family happiness. In that moment, Alexander Sterling's refusal no longer hurt. What hurt was the crushing certainty that he was right. They weren't his problem. They weren't anyone's problem. They were, and always would be, completely alone. Time dragged on, heavy and cruel. For Maya and Lily, every minute they remained in that gym was a new wave of shame. They sat motionless as the world slowly emptied around them. They heard the laughter fading away, the final praises from parents, the plans for a celebratory lunch. "We're going to that pizza place you love to celebrate your A-plus, champ. Honey, you were brilliant. Grandma is going to be so proud." Every happy sentence was like a tiny grain of salt being rubbed into their open wound. They didn't say a word. What could they say? The bond that had always united them was now a bond in pain, in the heavy silence of failure. Maya, who was always the rock, the source of wild ideas and courage, felt herself crumbling inside. Her plan hadn't just failed, it had made everything exponentially worse. She had dragged her sister to center stage and exposed her to that quiet humiliation. She wished she could shrink until she disappeared, take Lily with her to a safe place, and erase this day from memory. Lily, for her part, just stared at her own shoes, feeling the looks of pity as if they were physical blows. The noise of the gym was a blur, and the only clear thing in her mind was the desire to be home, in their room, where the world couldn't hurt them anymore. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Alexander Sterling was at war with himself. For 2 straight days, the girls' faces had haunted him. Maya's voice saying, "We don't have anyone else," echoed in his multi-million-dollar meetings. The image of Lily's pleading eyes appeared reflected in the window of his panoramic office. He tried to ignore it. He argued with himself that it wasn't his problem, that he had done the right thing, the logical thing. But the feeling that he had abandoned something fundamental wouldn't leave him in peace. It was illogical, irrational, and Alexander hated anything he couldn't control or explain. That morning, in the middle of a video conference about an acquisition in Asia, he did something he never does. He stopped. He interrupted the other party mid-sentence. "Gentlemen, my apologies. I need to handle an urgent and personal matter," he said, and ended the call, leaving a team of executives on the other side of the world in a state of shock. He couldn't explain why, but he felt a visceral, almost primitive need to go to that school, maybe to prove to himself that they were fine, that his refusal hadn't mattered, maybe just to ease his own conscience. When he arrived, the event was ending. He walked into the gymnasium, and what he saw paralyzed him. The noise and joy had already dissipated, leaving behind just an echo of celebration and a few staff members collecting chairs. And there, in a corner, next to a lonely poster, were them. They were not fine. They were not even close to fine. They were exactly as he had left them, alone. But now, their loneliness seemed to carry the weight of the world. They looked like 2 soldiers who had lost the war, sitting in silence amidst the devastated battlefield. Maya was the first to see him, a tall silhouette against the light from the door. Her first thought was pure irritation. Great, another adult to look at us with pity. But then the figure walked toward them, and she recognized him. Her heart leaped with panic and confusion. Lily raised her head, following her sister's gaze, and her eyes widened. It was him, the man who had said no. What did he want? He approached slowly, the sound of his expensive shoes echoing in the nearly empty gym. His face didn't have the impatience of their first meeting. It didn't have a hint of pity. There was something else, a dark expression of regret, of a newfound determination that was almost frightening. He stopped a few feet from them, his gaze fixed not on the poster, but on their faces, marked by sadness. He had come back. He wasn't supposed to be here. The man who controlled everything had lost control of a single decision, and now, standing there, in a silence broken only by his own breathing, his presence promised something impossible, something that defied logic. But before we find out what happens, I need to pause and ask you something. Have you ever felt completely invisible in a crowd? Have you ever had to swallow your tears, force a smile, and hope no one noticed how broken your heart was on the inside? If you understand that feeling, if you've been there, comment the word courage below. Just so we know that this story is about you too. The silence in the gym was heavy, thick with the unspoken pain of the two girls. Alexander took another step, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath with them. Maya and Lily flinched, expecting the final blow, maybe an "I told you so" disguised as sympathy. But what came was his voice, low and hoarse, a voice that didn't belong to the impatient CEO they'd met on the sidewalk. I'm so sorry," he said. The words came out with difficulty, as if he wasn't used to admitting a mistake. "I was wrong." The girls looked up, stunned by surprise. An adult, especially an adult this important, apologizing to them? It was a concept they didn't know existed. He knelt again, completely ignoring his expensive suit, bringing himself to their level. His gaze wasn't one of pity, but of a deep, unexpected respect. He pointed to the poster board they were trying to hide. "I got here at the end," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "but I heard what you said about your mother." He paused, swallowing hard, as if choosing the most important words of his life. "I saw all the important parents and mothers here today. I saw the firefighters, the doctors, the lawyers. But of all the professions I heard about, the hardest, the noblest, the bravest was your mother's. Being a hero in 2 shifts, like you said, that's a strength no amount of money in the world can buy. You should be so, so proud." And that was it, the magic word, pride, the validation they had desperately needed and didn't know how to ask for. That simple acknowledgement coming from the man who had rejected them, transformed the source of their shame into the greatest of honors. And the dam holding back their tears finally broke. These weren't tears of humiliation anymore, they were tears of relief. A loud sob escaped from Lily, a small broken sound that seemed to carry the weight of the entire day. Maya, the fortress, felt her eyes burn and tears stream warmly down her face, washing away all the bitterness. Alexander, a bit awkwardly, pulled a white linen handkerchief from his jacket pocket and held it out to them. The gesture was so unexpected, so formal and yet so kind, that it made them stop crying for a moment just to stare at the immaculate square of fabric. "Look," he said, changing his tone, trying to bring a little light back into the dim gymnasium. "I have an idea. What do you say we completely forget about this day, this gym, and all of this, and go get the biggest, messiest ice cream sundae this city has to offer, to celebrate the presentation of the 2 bravest girls I have ever met?" He emphasized the word celebrate, and they understood. He wasn't offering comfort. He was offering a victory. Maya looked at Lily, who was still sobbing softly. She saw the silent question in her sister's eyes. "Can we?" And for the first time that day, Maya felt hope return. Fragile, but real. She sniffled, wiped her nose on the back of her hand, and gave a small, trembling nod. A genuine smile, the first they had ever seen, lit up Alexander's face. He stood up, and with a care no one would expect from him, picked up the small poster board from the chair. "We're taking this masterpiece with us," he said. And as the 3 of them walked out of the gym, the billionaire in the impeccable suit and the 2 girls in their school uniforms, with him carrying the crumpled poster as if it were a precious trophy, the sunlight outside seemed brighter. They didn't know it, But they were leaving behind much more than an empty gymnasium. They were leaving behind loneliness. That small step towards an ice cream shop was in fact the first step on the long road back home. The ice cream parlor Alexander chose was a world of its own. A place where ice cream didn't come in plastic cups, but in glass goblets that looked like works of art, with shimmering sauces, fresh fruit, and star-shaped cookies. Maya and Lily, whose biggest treat was a lime popsicle from the cart in the park, stood frozen in front of the counter, a blast of colors and flavors they didn't even know how to name. Alexander, noticing their hesitation, just smiled. Today the rule is, there are no rules. You can point at anything you want, and then you can order more. With the ice literally broken, the conversation began to flow. Sitting at a small table, the three of them became an unlikely island of camaraderie. Alexander, a man whose daily conversations revolved around profit projections and market shares, found himself asking questions he hadn't asked in years. What's your favorite subject in school? What do you like to draw the most? Who tells the best jokes? And the girls, feeling safe and genuinely happy, began to talk. They talked about school, about their few friends, but mostly they talked about Claraara. Through their childish, admiration-filled voices, Alexander began to piece together the puzzle of this woman he had never met. "Mum makes the best carrot cake in the world," said Lily, her mouth smeared with chocolate sauce, "even when she gets home super tired from work and her classes. And she knows the name of every single bone in the human body," Maya added, gesturing dramatically with her spoon. "She's going to be the best nurse ever. She studies late at night when we're already asleep. She always says we're her team, the three of us against the world." Alexander listened, fascinated. Every detail painted a portrait of a woman of extraordinary strength and resilience. A lioness protecting her cubs, fighting against all odds for a better future for them. He felt a pang of admiration, a deep respect for this anonymous figure, and, at the same time, he felt something new growing inside him. That warmth in his chest, that feeling of doing something that truly mattered, was more addictive than closing any 9-figure deal. He wasn't just offering ice cream to 2 children. They, without knowing it, were offering him a glimpse of a life with purpose. The ride back in the car was filled with laughter and animated conversation. The sadness of the gymnasium seemed to belong to another lifetime. When they arrived on the modest street where the girls lived, the contrast between the luxury car and the simple buildings was stark. Alexander turned off the radio and turned to them. "All right, here we are," he said. "Thank you for the best ice cream of my life." "We should be thanking you," Lily said shyly. Alexander looked at the 4-story building with no doorman, and an instinct he didn't recognize took over. "I insist on walking you to the door," he declared, getting out of the car before he could second-guess himself. "I need to make sure my new friends get home safe and sound." The building's hallway was dark and smelled of old paint and disinfectant. As they climbed the flights of stairs, a strange feeling began to bubble up inside Alexander. A sense of familiarity, almost a deja vu that he couldn't explain. Was it the smell, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls? He shook his head, thinking it was just the emotional exhaustion of such an unusual day. They stopped in front of apartment 402. Maya, with an air of great responsibility, took a cord from around her neck with a single key on it and put it in the lock. Alexander was about to say goodbye, to close this unexpected chapter of his day and return to his orderly life. But fate, which had brought them together that afternoon, had other plans. One final, shocking surprise awaited him on the other side of that door. As he climbed those stairs, he felt a strange sense of familiarity he couldn't name. He just never imagined that when that door opened, he would come face to face with the woman who held the key to a secret he didn't even know he had. The door swung open, and Alexander Sterling's world, so carefully built on logic and control, began to crumble. Standing in the doorway was a woman with her hair in a messy bun, her face etched with a weariness that seemed to come from her soul, wearing sweatpants and a plain t-shirt. Her eyes widened at the sight of her daughters, a flash of instant relief, which in a split second turned to pure terror as they landed on the tall, suited man standing behind them. The blood drained from her face. She turned pale as a sheet. "Mommy," Maya cried, running to hug her, completely oblivious to the electric current of tension passing between the two adults. "You're not going to believe it. This is Alexander, the man I told you about. He took us for the best ice cream in the world." "He saw our presentation, Mommy," added Lily, more reserved but with her eyes shining. "He said you're a hero." Clara couldn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on Alexander, a storm of panic and recognition swirling within them. And he felt the same. The vague sense of familiarity that had chased him up the stairs crystallized into a sharp memory, an image he had buried under years of work and success. It wasn't the face of a student's mother. It was the face of the smart, sad-eyed girl who had been serving drinks at a university gala almost 8 years ago. A night of excess, of deep conversation, and of an impulsive, fleeting connection. A night with a girl whose name he had tried, but failed, to remember the next morning, until now. Clara. Recovering from the shock, he extended his hand out of pure instinct, a formal gesture to break the deafening silence. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Clara. Your daughters are extraordinary," he said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. He couldn't back down. He had to know. "I feel like we've met somewhere before, haven't we?" Clara took a step back, ignoring his outstretched hand, as if it were a snake. "I think you're mistaken, sir," she replied, her voice tight and fragile. "Thank you for bringing the girls home safely. But it's getting late. We need to go inside." She tried to close the door, a desperate attempt to protect the small universe she had built with so much sacrifice. But the Alexander standing there was not the same man from 2 days ago. He couldn't leave, not anymore. With a gentle movement he held the door, stopping it from closing. The touch was light, but the gesture was an earthquake. "Please," he insisted, his voice low but charged with an urgency that made her tremble. "Don't take me for a fool. The engineering school gala. Almost 8 years ago you dropped a tray of glasses." Each word was a shovel, unearthing the secret she had guarded with her life. Clara's face fell apart. The mask of strength she wore every day cracked, revealing the sheer panic underneath. "Girls," she said, turning abruptly, her voice a trembling command. "Go to your room now. Wash your hands and change your clothes. I need to talk to Mr. Sterling. Alone." The twins, sensing the gravity in their mother's voice for the first time, obeyed without question, casting confused and worried glances over their shoulders before disappearing behind their bedroom door. Alone. The small apartment, which had seemed cozy before, now felt like a cage. The air was thin. "What do you want?" she whispered, crossing her arms, as if she could shield herself from him. "Money? Is that it? Did you come here to make sure we wouldn't look for you? 'Cause you trouble?" "No," he shot back, the accusation wounding him more than he expected. "I didn't even know. I felt I had to come back. I saw how they were." "Clara, what is happening here? Why are you shaking like this?" She laughed, a humorless sound full of pain and irony. "Why am I shaking? You walk into my house, into my life, after 8 years, and you ask me why I'm shaking?" He took a step forward. "Then explain it to me. Help me understand." Clara looked at him, at the man who was both a complete stranger and the centerpiece of her life. She saw the genuine confusion in his eyes. She saw the man who had called her daughters brave, and the weight of all those years of silence, of fear, of loneliness finally crushed her. The fight was over. The tears she never allowed herself to cry began to fall, silent and heavy. She looked at the closed door of the girls' room and then back at him, her voice a soul-shattering whisper. "You want to understand, Alexander? Then look closer. Look at Maya. She has your stubbornness, your way of not taking no for an answer. Look at Lily. She has your smile, the one that plays at the corner of your mouth when you think no one is watching. They have your eyes." She took a deep breath, handing him the truth that was her greatest blessing and her greatest curse. "They're not just my daughters, Alexander. They're yours. They're yours." 2 words, just 2 words that weren't shouted but whispered. And yet they hit Alexander Sterling with the force of a cataclysm. The world, as he knew it, stopped spinning. The floor of the small apartment seemed to vanish from under his feet, and for a moment he was an astronaut adrift, disconnected from all reality, with Clara's voice echoing in the vacuum. Yours. The word reverberated in his mind, in his blood, in every cell of his body. It wasn't a logical thought, it was a seismic recognition, a truth his body seemed to understand before his mind could. And then, like a film on fast forward, his memory began to rewind, but now with new subtitles, a new and shocking interpretation for every scene. The image of Maya, standing on the sidewalk, challenging him with her eyes, the childish stubbornness he had found curious. Now, he saw himself in her, the same refusal to accept no, the same spark of defiance that had carried him from an orphanage to a boardroom. The image of Lily, with her shy, almost secret smile that appeared at the corner of her mouth. It was his smile, the same one his assistant sometimes pointed out in photographs that he never admitted to having. The conversation in the ice cream parlor, Lily's intelligence, Maya's creativity. It wasn't just the brightness of 2 smart kids. It was his legacy, his genetics, his own mind reflected in 2 small, perfect versions. The inexplicable pull that made him return to the school. It wasn't an act of charity, it was instinct. A primal call he hadn't known how to decipher, his DNA screaming to protect itself, to protect its offspring. The feeling of deja vu on the stairs wasn't a glitch in his memory. It was the memory of his own soul guiding him back home, to a place he never even knew he had built. Logic, the pillar of his life, reassembled itself in seconds, and every piece clicked into place with a painful, blinding clarity. And right after the clarity came the wave. An avalanche of emotions so overwhelming it left him breathless. First, regret. A regret so vast and deep it was almost physical, an ache in his chest. 7 years, almost 8. He had missed everything. The first steps, the first words. Did they ever say Dada? The first fever, the first lost tooth, the first day of school. Every scraped knee he didn't kiss better, every nightmare he didn't wake them from, every story he didn't read before bed. He wasn't just a stranger who had appeared in their lives. He was a ghost, an absence, a hole in their story. A story he had co-authored. Then came admiration. An admiration that bordered on reverence. He looked at Clara, still crying silently, huddled as if awaiting a verdict. This woman he barely knew from one night in his youth, had faced the world alone. She hadn't sought him out. She hadn't used her children as a weapon or an insurance policy. She had worked 2 shifts, cleaned other people's floors, sacrificed her sleep and her youth to give them a dignified life, to fill them with love and values, to shape them into the incredible girls he had met. She wasn't just a hero in 2 shifts, she was a titan. And finally, beneath it all, the most terrifying and most undeniable emotion of all, love. It wasn't a choice, not a decision. It was a fact, a biological, chemical, spiritual fact. He loved those girls. He loved Maya's courage and Lily's sweetness. He loved the way their hands felt so small in his. He loved the sound of their laughter. The love he felt wasn't a new feeling. It was just a feeling that had finally been given a name. His eyes scanned the small apartment again. It was no longer a humble place. It was a sanctuary, the place that had kept his daughters safe. The drawings on the fridge weren't scribbles, they were masterpieces. The worn-out couch wasn't old furniture. It was the stage for countless bedtime stories. He took a staggering step back and sank into the nearest chair, his body heavy, his mind in collapse. He ran his hands through his hair, once, twice, trying to anchor himself to reality. His eyes met Clara's. She saw that the anger she had feared wasn't there. There was only a profound sorrow and a silent awe. He looked at the closed bedroom door and whispered, more to himself than to her, testing the weight of the word on his tongue. I have daughters. Then he looked up at Clara, his voice hoarse, broken by the weight of 7 years of ignorance. All these years, you did all this alone. It wasn't a question, it was the acknowledgement of a miracle. 3 days passed. 3 days of a profound silence that hung over 2 very different homes. In the small apartment, Clara and the girls lived in a limbo of expectation and fear. Every knock on the door, a jolt. In the glass skyscraper, Alexander Sterling isolated himself from the world. He cancelled all his meetings, turned off his phone, and for the first time in over a decade, he stopped. He didn't think about stocks or investments. He thought about swing sets, about handwriting workbooks, and the smell of carrot cake. He re-evaluated his life, not in spreadsheets of profit and loss, but in moments, and he realized with a cutting clarity that the column for moments that actually matter was terrifyingly empty. He had spent his entire life building an empire, but he had never built a home. He had earned the respect of his rivals, but he didn't know the warmth of a daughter's hug. Clara's revelation hadn't just given him 2 daughters. It had given him a mirror, and the image he saw reflected was that of an immensely wealthy and profoundly poor man. On the 4th day, he returned. When Clara opened the door, she didn't see the shocked man from the other night, nor the powerful CEO. She saw a man with his shoulders a little lighter, his eyes tired, but with a calm and a resolution she had never seen before. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quiet. Seated in the small living room, he didn't begin with accusations or demands. He began with the purest, most disarming humility. "I've spent the last few days thinking," he said, looking directly at her. "Thinking about you, about your strength, your courage. I tried to imagine what it was like all these years, and the truth is, I can't. It's something too big and too noble for my imagination." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The man you met at that party, Clara. He was a boy, an arrogant, self-absorbed boy who thought he had conquered the world. If you had come to me back then, with that news, I would have been cruel. I would have doubted you, demanded proof, maybe even offered you money to disappear. I would have broken your heart and theirs before they even started beating strongly." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she heard the validation of her greatest fears. "You did the right thing," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You protected them. You protected them from me." This was the lesson. Alexander's great and transformative lesson. He understood that he wasn't there to fix a mistake from the past, but to be honored with a present he didn't deserve, but which, he now knew, was the only thing he truly wanted. "I'm not here out of obligation," he said, his voice now firm, filled with the conviction he used to close deals, but in service of something infinitely greater. "I'm here because, in just a few days, these girls have given me what 40 years of success never could. A reason. They are not a problem, Clara. They are not an unexpected responsibility. They are the answer. The answer to a void I didn't even know existed inside me. I want to be their father, more than I have ever wanted anything in my entire life. If you both will let me." He wasn't offering his money or his power. He was offering himself, stripped of everything. And in that instant, Clara knew that the waiting, the fear, and the solitary struggle had finally come to an end. What happened next was not a fairy tale, with a snap of the fingers that magically fixed everything. It was something much more real, and for that very reason, much more beautiful. It was the slow, brick-by-brick construction of a family. The first thing Alexander did wasn't to sign a check, but a document. In the downtown courthouse, beside a visibly emotional Clara, he gave the girls what they had never had and secretly always dreamed of: a full name. Maya Sterling and Lily Sterling. The name on the paper was a symbol, a public and legal promise that they would never be alone in the world again. He insisted that Clara quit her cleaning job. "It's not charity," he told her, when he saw the proud hesitation in her eyes. "It's an investment in the best nurse this country will ever have, and in the mother of my daughters. With the financial security he provided, Clara was able to dive into her studies, and little by little her eyes lost their look of chronic exhaustion and gained the shine of hope and a future she could finally see. They moved from the small apartment to a house in a quiet neighborhood, a house with a small yard where he promised to build a treehouse, and with separate rooms for the girls, who most nights still preferred to sleep together, whispering about their new adventures. But the real, most profound change wasn't in material things. It was in time. The time that Alexander, the man who scheduled his life in 6-minute blocks, now dedicated entirely to them. The girls' silent evenings were replaced by loud dinners around a real table, where Alexander learned about math tests and recess gossip. The boring weekends transformed into trips to the park, with him clumsy and laughing, teaching Lily to ride a bike without training wheels, while Maya sketched the scene in her notebook. He, who only read financial reports and biographies of entrepreneurs, now knew by heart the lines of every princess and hero in the books he read to them before bed. He discovered that the feeling of a small hand searching for his in the dark was more valuable than any stock on the market. The final proof of his new life came months later at the school's parent-teacher conference. The same gymnasium, the same people. But this time, Maya and Lily weren't huddled in a corner. They were in the center, bouncing between Clara and Alexander. When the teacher called their names to congratulate them on their progress, both of them stood up together. And as he listened to the praise, Alexander didn't feel the pride of a CEO whose investment had yielded a good return. He felt the simple, overwhelming pride of a father. As they were leaving, Leo, the classmate whose dad was a firefighter, ran up to them. "Wow, you brought your dad today," he said, with the innocent curiosity of children. Maya smiled, a wide, confident smile that Alexander had never seen before. She squeezed his hand tightly and said, her voice clear and loud for anyone to hear, "He didn't just come today. He's my dad. Forever." If this story about unexpected encounters and how love builds a family in ways we can't even imagine also touched your heart, please leave a like to support our work. We love to know how far our stories travel, so comment below and tell us what city you're watching from today. And if you believe in the power of stories that connect and move us, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss our next videos. On the screen right now are 2 more incredible stories. Just pick your favorite and continue this journey with us. Thanks for your company and see you next time.